All right, how is everybody doing today?
Good.
All right, good. You guys got to talk back to me. I'm a engagement speaker.
Are you using the right? Okay. There you go.
Okay,
You're good.
just hold this.
Yeah. Turn it off. Just here's your paddles.
Sure.
No good?
Today we're going to talk a little bit about Sitecore page event tracking, specifically using Web API. My name is Benjamin Vidal. I think most of you all know who I am. Quick introduction, I've been working with Sitecore since 2005, right along with Marco Tana, who probably taught me a little bit in the beginning until I kind of spur off on my own a little bit about six years later. But yeah. One thing I wanted to go over is that, Brett mentioned that we have marketing sessions and technical sessions. So most of my presentations are targeted to the developer. This one is a little bit mix of both. Okay. If you have a question, just please raise your hand, ask me a question. I'll be happy to answer the question if I can. If not, I'll at least find out the information so we can, all, be informed well. Because this is a community, we present, but really we would like to make sure that everyone can participate. If you all have some information that you want to provide or say, just feel free to do so, so that we can keep an open dialogue. And I'm going to attempt to use this Mac. There we go. I did, but I haven't started using it yet. Quick agenda, we're going to go over page events. We're going to talk about what they are. We're going to talk about using Ajax with page events. And then how that may affect an architectural decision. So this should be fairly quick. And then, you guys can see how you may utilize page events in your cycle implementation. What are page events? Has anybody been using page events before today? Does anybody know what they are? Okay. So page events are a way for you as a user of Sitecore to track specific events or activity that happens on a website, such as a search, a download, a user registering for their account, checkout, if they're subscribing or unsubscribing to a news article. These are actions or events that you may want to track. And what's helpful is that when you start tracking these in the XDB, you can start reporting on them. You can start really seeing how your users are interacting with your website. It goes beyond just seeing what pages they visited, but truly what actions took place on those pages. And as a marketer, if you're familiar with Sitecore, you can go click on a page, and there is an Analyze button in the ribbon. On the Analyze button, there is a button called Attributes. And attributes is this section or the dialog box here that shows you how to either check for page events, campaigns, and failed actions. We won't go over that today. Also, there's goals right next to it if you're familiar with Sitecore goals. If you want to see if a user has triggered a goal on their website, you can do that by clicking on goals in that ribbon and then checking which goal that you want to fire when a user visits a specific page. For example, if you want to create a page event called search, and whenever a user visits the search page, you can go to this dialog box, check the search page event, and whenever a user visits that page, it will XDB will track that user triggering that page event. So try to think about that for your specific website, for your specific business. What page events, what activity do I want to track of my users and see if they're performing on a website, and then later reporting them for XDB. What's powerful with that is that you can personalize off of those page events. So let's say you want to change some piece of content based on if a user search for a particular word or a particular page. Let's say you want to see if a users have subscribed to the newsletter. Well, instead of showing them the subscription module again, maybe you show them something else. Okay. So page events can be really effective in terms of how it controls your experience for your users. Where are page events located? If you're familiar with Sitecore, page events are located at this path under Analytics. I have a screenshot of just a site that has a lot of page events. Web Forms for Marketers creates its own page events. Commerce Connect, if you're using Sitecore Commerce at all, it comes with a list of page events, add to cart, remove for cart, those type of page events. You can also organize page events by folders, okay? I think this particular site probably has about, I don't know, 50 or so different events that a user can trigger. It gets a lot. And it depends on what you want to track. Maybe there's a specific initiative or specific project that you want to start measuring in terms of the activity of the site. I found this very helpful to see, I found this very helpful to see what activity a user is performing, because Sitecore gives something that Google doesn't really give you. And Sitecore can give you the ability to see what the visitor is doing in their path. Google's going to let you know how many people visited a page, how many events were tracked. But what if you want to know, what did this person do in the lifetime of their session? And that's very crucial to understanding how users interact with a website. And then adding the ability to trigger different page events, the ones that we control. We can report on this data. We can really look at how the user experience is affecting our site. Because that may, being informed that way may allow us to change our design decisions, the way we build things, the way we program, what content we show, and what effect it's having on the overall website. When you create a page event, there's one thing that you have to do is deploy that page event or publish it, or it won't be active in the site. This is an example of an experience profile. I took the bottom section as a screenshot. It kind of shows the activity tab here. And under visits, this shows a list of visits and then a list of events. So these are all the events that a user can trigger. This is kind of my test account that I play around with. And so far, during the lifetime of this website, I've triggered 568 events. So within 209 visits, okay? And how many people are familiar with using Experience Profile? Okay. How many people would like to use Experience Profile? Okay. Well, if you use Experience Profile, you can click on each individual visit, and that visit will show you which events and on which page that user triggered that event. So you can really get very granular in determining, hey, this user executed this event on this page within this visit with this particular contact. And then I don't have a slide for that, but you can go even further to start reporting on that data to get some metrics to figure out, is this particular functionality or piece of content engaging to my users? And if so, you can keep it. If not, you can start refining your approach to figure out, what can I get them to engage in my website? Simply by tracking the events that they perform on your website using this method. Okay. If you're familiar with Sitecore goals, goals can be tracked as page events as well. A little secret, goals are really page events in the back end of Sitecore. They just kind of separate them out, but goals are tracked the same way. Any questions so far? All right, so here we get a little technical talk. Ajax via Web API. Who is familiar with Web API? How many developers do I have in the room? Okay, I'm speaking to you all, okay? How many of you all have used Web API before? Okay, 1, 2, 3, okay. Web API is basically one of Microsoft's way of allowing us to engage using web service, a RESTful web service. Usually that RESTful web service is a stateless web service. And I typically have used Web API in the past to perform AJAX calls on the website. For example, let's say a user comes to the web page and we're showing let's say we're showing a shopping cart, okay? Typically that shopping cart may load with the page. But let's say you want to do some fancy loading and some fancy user experience to show to show a waiting graphic while the cart loads for the user. You can then call that cart, the developer can call that cart via web API and via AJAX, and then load that cart on the web page. It's very important, I think, as a developer to understand the difference of implementing code using AJAX via web API versus the traditional MVC approach. Doing so can affect the way your marketers or analytics team views analytics inside of Sitecore. So one thing about web API is that it's stateless, meaning it doesn't have a user session tied to it. So typically, out of the box, if you were to do a web API call to perform some sort of AJAX to the server, it would not get tracked by Sitecore's analytics. Very important to understand. Am I going over someone's head right now? Okay. Is this all making sense to the development team? Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm keeping right.
Great, Brett. I'm glad you're keeping right up. The reason why this may be an issue is, let's say you get that shopping cart via an AJAX call, and you want to track a page event within that AJAX call. You want to know, did this user, does this user cart have over $50 in it? Did they have a specific product that you guys were doing a campaign on? Did that get added to their cart? Maybe you want to do some things programmatically there, and you still want your user experience to use AJAX. Well, out of the box, you wouldn't be able to do that. So how do we achieve that goal? One thing you have to do as a developer is make sure that your web API calls are enabled, or your web API calls enable the session state. So that anytime you make a request back to your web server, it has the relevant session state available to it. This is just some code for the developers of how we've tied a session state to a web API route. And by doing so, we can register that with Sitecore, and anytime a web API or AJAX call is made, Sitecore is aware of it. Why is this important? It's important because once you make those web API calls active by using session state, Sitecore is going to track each of those calls as an individual request or page view by that user. And what happens is, if you look over here to the right, this is the page, search.aspx, and then /API/API are two different web API calls. What this means is that this user came to this web page, and then two additional calls were made. This was the same visitor list that I showed you earlier that's tracking each page one at a time. But here, for one page request, we get 3 pages in Sitecore. So that may get a little, what's the word I want to say? A little misleading, not misleading, a little too much data to look at. Really, you just want to look at what page did the user view. You may not care how many AJAX calls the developer decided to use when they want to present the content. But it's something to be aware of when this type of implementation is used. It's not necessarily wrong, it's just different. And we all need to understand what it means when it comes to tracking analytics with Sitecore. In situations like this, and I'm kind of skipping ahead to my last slide, in situations like this, we have to ask ourselves the question, do we care that an AJAX call is made or not? The developer or the architect needs to consult with the analytics team to figure out what do they need to track. Do they only want to track pages, or do they want to track every single request the user is making on the site is making on behalf of the user? Do we care about these calls? We may not. We may want to see how many times they're being triggered for the purpose of performance. We may not care about them at all. So in this situation with line 3, this API call is registering a page event. You can't really see it, but that's where it would show. The question is, I'll ask you, Brett, would you want to have the page event tied to the web API call, or would you want it tied to the search page? That was a real question. I'm just asking you to see if you would, what you would do. You don't know, right?
I just want to see that someone made a product search.
That is true.
That's all.
So, and it depends on the requirements.
I'm sure there's effective doing one versus
Yeah, so some decision points from an architect and the developer at Sitecore is to realize, how does my analytics team want to view page events? Do those page events really affect the way I need to report on data? In some cases, I've had to update some logic in some sites to attribute that page event to the web page rather than to the API call, so that when we report on it, that page gets the attribution instead of the API call. Okay, so from a engagement value, or you want to see what page is really doing the most, if the calls are separated that way, it may be difficult to determine what page the user actually created the engagement on. Okay, because if you go to another page, it may have a similar API call, and you may not know, was it this page or that page that really triggered the engagement. Okay. That's all.
So what,
I don't leave until someone asks me a question.
what did we just do?
What did we just do?
Or page
This is
events, this was Sitecore 9, or is it?
No, page events have been in there since Sitecore 7. Any other questions?
Do you guys use? I'm sorry.
Red dot under your shirt.
Someone's about to shoot.
What? That's a red. Okay. Don't scare me like that. Red dots are never good in movies.
Shooter.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, does anybody use goals or use goals to trigger anything today, or even track?
Goals. Yeah.
Web forms for marketers is a good service.
Yeah.
And those, some of them are out of the box. So.
Yeah. Some of them. Yeah. Some of them out of the box, but take a look at the Analyze tab on every page. See what page events are available to you. Search, download. Those are out of the box. You may want to check them on your website, and then that way Sitecore can get a little bit more information about what's happening on your users, and then you can eventually report on that data in the past. I think over the past year, I've started to really appreciate what XDB is actually doing to be able to produce some real powerful reports on how user interactivity is happening on the website that you can't get through Google Analytics. Okay, all right, that's all.